I'm Audrey, 28 years old, and for the first time in my life, my parents told me to skip our family Thanksgiving. We just need space this year, Mom said, her voice strangely distant. Those words crushed me. Thanksgiving at my parents' home had been sacred, unchangeable, especially now when I was still raw from my divorce from Marcus. I couldn't understand why they'd push me away when I needed them most. Little did I know their request had nothing to do with rejection and everything to do with their own hidden struggles. Before I share what happened next, tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe to hear more stories about family, healing, and the unexpected lessons that bring us closer together. To understand why my parents' request hit me so hard, you need to know that the Harrison family Thanksgiving wasn't just a meal. It was our cornerstone tradition. My mom Lillian, 56, spent weeks planning the menu, decorating the dining room with hand-pressed autumn leaves and family photos. Dad Brian, 58, would smoke a turkey in the backyard, proudly monitoring the temperature through the night while sipping his special holiday bourbon. My brother Jason, 32, always drove in from Philadelphia with his famous maple pecan pies. And I brought the cranberry relish, made from my grandmother's recipe that only I was trusted to prepare correctly. For 28 years, we never missed this gathering. Even when Jason was studying abroad in college, my parents flew us all to London so we could be together. When I started dating Marcus in college, he was immediately inducted into our Thanksgiving rituals. 5 years ago, when we got married, my father made a touching speech about how our family circle was growing stronger. But circles can break. 8 months ago, Marcus told me he needed to find himself and moved out of our home. The divorce finalized 3 months later when I discovered he'd been finding himself in the company of his young coworker for over a year. The betrayal left me hollow, questioning everything I thought I knew about love and commitment. My parents had been my rock throughout the divorce. Mom drove 3 hours to stay with me that first terrible week, cleaning my apartment and making sure I ate while I cried myself to sleep each night. Dad called daily, sometimes just sitting on the phone in supportive silence when I couldn't find words. They helped me find a small but charming one-bedroom apartment after I had to sell our house. Mom even arranged for her interior designer friend to help me furnish it on my limited budget, creating a space that felt nothing like the home I'd shared with Marcus, exactly what I needed. With their unwavering support, I slowly started rebuilding my life. I threw myself into my work as a graphic designer, even landing a major new client. I began attending a divorce recovery group on Wednesday evenings. I adopted a cat named Jasper who became my furry therapist. Small steps toward healing, but steps nonetheless. As October turned to November, I found myself actually looking forward to Thanksgiving. The thought of being surrounded by family and our familiar tradition felt like the emotional shelter I desperately needed. I imagined myself in my parents' warm kitchen, the scent of sage and butter filling the air, my mother's hand occasionally squeezing my shoulder as we worked side by side. I needed that continuity, that reminder that some things remained steady even when my personal life had shattered. So when Mom called on a random Tuesday evening in early November, I answered with a smile, expecting to discuss Thanksgiving plans. "Audrey, honey," she began, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your father and I have been talking, and we think we should skip Thanksgiving this year." The words didn't register at first. Skip Thanksgiving? In our family, that was like suggesting we skip breathing. "What do you mean?" I asked, certain I'd misunderstood. We need some space this year. It's nothing for you to worry about." "Space from what? From me?" My voice cracked embarrassingly. "No, honey, no. It's not like that." Mom sighed. "We're just going through some things, and a big holiday feels like too much right now. We were thinking maybe we could do something small in December instead." I sat on my couch, Jasper purring obliviously beside me, as my mother continued with vague reassurances that explained nothing. By the time we hung up, I felt like I'd been slapped. What things could possibly be important enough to cancel our sacred family tradition? And why wouldn't she tell me what was really going on? Over the next few days, I called my mom 3 more times, trying to understand what was happening. Each conversation left me more confused than the last. "Are you and Dad having marriage problems?" I asked during our second call, my stomach twisting at the thought. After my own marriage imploded, the stability of my parents' 35-year union had become even more precious to me. "No, nothing like that," Mom said quickly. "We're fine, sweetheart. We just need a quiet year." During our third call, I tried a different approach. "Is it a health issue? Is Dad okay? Are you?" "We're both healthy," she assured me, but something in her voice sounded strained. "Please don't worry." "Then why won't you tell me what's going on?" I finally asked directly during our fourth conversation. "There's nothing going on," Mom replied, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "Not everything has to be a dramatic situation, Audrey. Sometimes adults just need space." That stung. The implication that I was being childish or needy by simply wanting to understand cut deep. I ended the call quickly, blinking back tears. I called my brother Jason next, sure that he would share my confusion and concern. "Yeah, it's weird," he admitted. "Mom told me the same thing last night. But you know how they are, they've always been pretty independent. Maybe they're just tired." Tired? After hosting Thanksgiving for almost 30 years, they suddenly decide they're tired? And they won't even give us a real explanation? I paced my small living room, Jasper watching from his perch on the bookshelf. "Don't you think that's strange?" Jason paused. "I guess so. But what can we do? We can't force them to host Thanksgiving if they don't want to." "It's not about the hosting," I said, frustrated that he wasn't getting it. "We could have done it at your place or even squeezed into my apartment. It's about them basically uninviting us from the family holiday with no explanation. Don't you think that's hurtful?" Another pause. "I hadn't really thought about it that way," Jason admitted. "I've been swamped at work, trying to finish this project before the holiday." Of course, he hadn't thought about it. Jason had always been more detached from family dynamics than I was. Plus, he had his demanding job as an architect, a serious girlfriend, and a full social life. He wasn't nursing the raw wound of a failed marriage or counting on family Thanksgiving as an emotional lifeline. "Maybe they're mad at me," I said, voicing my deepest fear. "Maybe they're tired of dealing with my divorce drama and need a break from me." "Audrey, that's ridiculous," Jason said firmly. "Mom and Dad adore you. They've been worried sick about you all year. Then why shut me out now? It doesn't make sense." "I don't know," Jason sighed. "But I'm sure it's not about you." After hanging up with Jason, I spiraled into dark thoughts. What if my parents secretly blamed me for my failed marriage? What if they'd always liked Marcus better and were disappointed in me for not making it work? What if they'd just been pretending to be supportive while actually growing increasingly tired of my emotional neediness? I tried to push these thoughts away, knowing they weren't rational. My parents had never been anything but loving and supportive. They'd never given me any reason to doubt their devotion or honesty. But rejection, even a perceived one, has a way of awakening our deepest insecurities. Still, I decided to respect their wishes. If they needed space, I would give it to them, even if it hurt. I texted my mom, "I understand. Let me know when you're ready to get together. Love you both." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. We love you too." But understanding was the last thing I felt. With Thanksgiving now a painful question mark, I needed to make alternative plans. My friend Stephanie immediately invited me to join her family gathering when I mentioned my situation. "My mom always makes enough food for 50 people anyway," she said. "And you know how much they love you. Please come, it'll be fun." I accepted gratefully, though the thought of being a charity case at someone else's family Thanksgiving made my chest tight. Stephanie had been a witness to my divorce drama, holding my hand through some of my darkest moments. Her parents had always been kind to me, but they weren't my family. They didn't know about my grandfather's secret ingredient in the turkey stuffing or laugh at my dad's annual retelling of the Great Turkey Fire of 2007. They wouldn't understand why I always sat in the chair next to the window or why the cranberry sauce had to be served in my grandmother's crystal dish. The awkwardness continued when extended family members started calling about Thanksgiving plans. "What do you mean it's canceled?" my Aunt Patricia asked when I called to explain the situation. Your mother hasn't mentioned anything to me. Are you sure you understood correctly? That's what she told me, I said, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Maybe you should call her directly. I certainly will, Aunt Patricia said. This is very unlike Lillian. My cousin Drew texted next. Is everything okay with Uncle Brian and Aunt Lillian? Mom's freaking out about Thanksgiving being canceled. I responded vaguely, not wanting to spread concern but also unable to provide real answers I didn't have. By mid-November, I was tired of the confusion and increasingly worried. This behavior was so out of character for my parents that something significant must be happening. Whatever their need for space really meant, my gut told me they might need support more than solitude. After another sleepless night, I made a decision. I would drive to my parents' house that weekend unannounced. Perhaps face-to-face, I could finally understand what was happening with the two people who had always been my emotional foundation. The 3-hour drive to my parents' suburban home gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I would say. I didn't want to ambush them or make them feel like I was disrespecting their request for space. But I also needed them to understand how their unexplained withdrawal was affecting me. As I turned onto their familiar tree-lined street, my anxiety spiked. What if they were angry about my surprise visit? What if they refused to talk to me? Worse, what if I discovered they really were tired of supporting me through my divorce recovery? I pulled into their driveway behind my dad's silver Volvo. At least they were home. Taking a deep breath, I approached the front door of the colonial-style house I'd grown up in, noticing immediately that the porch planters, which Mom typically filled with seasonal flowers, sat empty. A small but telling detail: my mother had never neglected her beloved planters before. I rang the doorbell, heart pounding. After a long moment, the door swung open to reveal my mother, her expression shifting from polite readiness to shock. Audrey, what are you doing here? Her hand flew to her hair, which I now noticed lacked its usual perfect styling. I had to see you, I said simply. I've been worried. You should have called first, she said, but stepped back to let me in. The house felt different immediately. The entryway table was cluttered with mail and papers instead of displaying its usual careful arrangement of family photos and a fresh flower vase. The living room beyond had an unlived-in feel, despite clear signs of occupation: a coffee mug on the side table, a throw blanket crumpled on the couch. Is Dad home? I asked, following Mom toward the kitchen. He's in the basement, she replied, her movements tense as she filled the electric kettle, organizing some things. As we entered the kitchen, I was struck by the dining table, typically kept pristine except during holiday preparations, now covered with stacks of papers, folders, and what looked distinctly like financial statements. Mom quickly moved to gather them, shoving documents into folders with uncharacteristic disorganization. Sorry about the mess, she muttered. We haven't been expecting company. Mom, I said gently, placing my hand on hers to still her nervous movement. What's going on? And please don't tell me nothing again. Before she could answer, my dad appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to something like resignation when he saw me. Audrey, he said, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This is unexpected. I know, and I'm sorry for just showing up. But I needed to see you both. Something's wrong, and it's not like you to shut me out. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Dad sighed heavily and pulled out a kitchen chair. Let's sit down, he said. We gathered around the kitchen table, the heart of so many family discussions over the years. Mom fidgeted with a pen, not meeting my eyes. Dad looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered from just a few months ago. We didn't want you to know, Dad finally said, his voice rough. We didn't want to burden you with this, after everything you've been going through. Know what? I asked, my anxiety mounting. Dad looked at Mom, who nodded almost imperceptibly. He took a deep breath. I lost my job 6 months ago. The words hung in the air between us. My father, the steadfast financial advisor who had worked at the same firm for over 20 years, who had put both Jason and me through college without a single student loan, who had always been the embodiment of financial stability and wise planning, had lost his job. 6 months ago? I repeated, struggling to process this. But that would have been right around when your divorce was being finalized, Mom finished quietly. You were going through so much, Audrey. We couldn't add to your worries. The pieces started falling into place. So all those times you came to help me, drove to my place, took me to dinner. We wanted to support you, Dad said firmly. Your situation was the priority. But how? I mean, what happened with your job? Dad's face tightened. The firm was acquired by a larger company. They kept saying no positions would be eliminated, but that turned out to be corporate doublespeak. They let go of most of the senior advisors, the ones with the highest salaries. Dad, I'm so sorry, I said, reaching for his hand across the table. Have you been looking for another position? A shadow crossed his face. Of course. But at 58, in this industry, let's just say it's been challenging. I've had some interviews, but they're hiring younger advisors they can pay less. We've been dipping into our savings, Mom added, her voice small. But with the mortgage and health insurance and everything else. I glanced at the papers strewn across the table with new understanding. These weren't just random documents. They were bills, budget worksheets, retirement account statements, job applications. Is that why you canceled Thanksgiving? I asked softly. Because of money? Mom's eyes filled with tears. We couldn't afford it this year, not the way we usually do it. The big turkey, all the special ingredients, the decorations, it adds up. But we were too embarrassed to tell you and Jason the real reason. We've never not been able to provide for our family, Dad added, his voice strained. We didn't want you kids to worry or feel like you needed to help us. Parents are supposed to support their children, not the other way around. So you just decided to cancel the whole holiday? Without any explanation. We thought it would be easier, Mom said, wiping a tear. We thought we'd have a new job by now, that this would be temporary. But it's dragging on longer than we expected. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time I'd been worried they were rejecting me, when they were actually protecting me in their own misguided way. Why didn't you just tell us the truth? I asked, feeling a complex mix of relief, sympathy, and lingering hurt. Because we're your parents, Dad said simply. Our job is to take care of you, not burden you with our problems. Especially after everything with Marcus, Mom added. You were just starting to seem like yourself again. We didn't want to set you back. I sat back in my chair, taking in their worried faces. My parents, these pillars of strength and stability in my life, had been silently struggling for months, all while continuing to support me through my own crisis. The realization was both heartbreaking and eye-opening. So instead of having a smaller Thanksgiving or letting us help, you decided to just cancel the holiday that means the most to our family? I asked gently. They exchanged another look, this one tinged with shame. When you put it that way, Dad said quietly, I can see we made a mistake. I sat at my parents' kitchen table, the truth finally laid bare between us. The financial papers scattered around us told a story of struggle my parents had tried desperately to hide, not just from me, but from themselves. The reality of my father's unemployment and their dwindling savings wasn't just about money. It was about identity, pride, and the roles we play in our family. I can't believe you've been dealing with this alone for 6 months, I said, my voice catching. All while helping me through my divorce. Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's what parents do, sweetheart. But that's just it, I replied, feeling a swell of emotion. You've always been there for me for everything. When I failed algebra in 10th grade and you hired a tutor without ever making me feel stupid. When I crashed the car the week after getting my license and Dad said accidents happen and never mentioned it again. When I wanted to switch majors in college and you supported me even though it meant an extra year of tuition. I took a shaky breath, memories flooding back. When Marcus left and I felt like my world was ending, you dropped everything to be there for me. You helped me find a new apartment, buy new furniture that didn't remind me of him, even took me to that divorce recovery group the first night when I was too scared to go alone. Dad looked down at his hands, his usual confidence notably absent. That's different, Audrey. That's what parents are supposed to do. And what are children supposed to do when their parents need help? I challenged gently. Just ignore it because it doesn't fit some predefined family role? My father had no immediate answer. Do you remember what you told me the day Marcus moved out? I continued, looking directly at Dad. You said, family means never having to face hard things alone. Did you mean that only applies to Jason and me? That you and Mom somehow don't qualify for the same support? It's not that simple, Mom interjected. We're the parents. We're supposed to be the strong ones. Why? I pressed. Because you're older? Because that's how it's always been? Mom, you taught me that strength isn't about handling everything yourself. It's about knowing when to lean on the people who love you. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, perhaps, of her own wisdom being reflected back to her. And all this time, I continued, gesturing to the financial papers, while I've been calling you, worried about Thanksgiving being canceled, thinking maybe you were tired of dealing with my divorce drama. You were actually sitting here worrying about money and job applications and how to keep supporting everyone else. We never meant to make you worry, Dad said, regret evident in his voice. We thought we were sparing you. By shutting me out? By making me think my family was falling apart in some mysterious way I wasn't allowed to understand. My voice rose slightly, the hurt of the past weeks surfacing. Do you know what that did to me? After everything with Marcus, to suddenly feel rejected by my own parents without explanation. Mom's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Audrey, we never thought of it that way. We never meant to make you feel rejected. I know you didn't, I said, softening my tone. But that's what happens when we don't tell each other the truth. We create space for all sorts of painful misunderstandings. The three of us sat in silence for a moment, the weight of these realizations settling around us. Through the kitchen window, I could see the old oak tree in the backyard, now bare of leaves, its branches stark against the November sky. I remembered climbing that tree as a child, Dad always waiting below, arms outstretched, ready to catch me if I fell. The memory brought fresh tears to my eyes. I need to call Jason, I said suddenly, pulling out my phone. Mom looked alarmed. Audrey, wait. He deserves to know too, Mom. We're not kids anymore. We're adults who love you both and deserve the chance to support you the way you've always supported us. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded. I dialed Jason's number, putting the phone on speaker when he answered. Hey, what's up? His voice filled the kitchen, casual and unaware of the emotional conversation he was entering. Jason, I'm at Mom and Dad's, I began. There's something you need to know. With my parents' reluctant permission, I explained the situation to my brother. There was a long silence after I finished. Dad lost his job 6 months ago? Jason finally said, his voice tight with concern. And you guys didn't tell us? We didn't want to worry you, Dad replied, his voice unnaturally small. So that's why you canceled Thanksgiving? Jason asked. Because of money? Essentially, yes, Mom admitted. Another silence. Then Jason's voice, stronger now, I'm coming home this weekend. We need to talk about this as a family. After we hung up, I turned back to my parents. See? That's what family does. We show up for each other. Dad rubbed his hand across his face, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. When did you get so wise? I had good teachers, I replied with a small smile. And maybe going through my own crisis this year taught me something about accepting help. It's not always easy to be vulnerable, even with the people who love us most. As the afternoon stretched into evening, we continued talking, really talking, about their financial situation, Dad's job search, and the emotions they'd been hiding. Mom made a simple dinner from what she had in the fridge, and we ate at the kitchen counter, the formal dining room untouched. Looking at my parents across the countertop, I saw them clearly for perhaps the first time, not as the infallible figures of my childhood, but as human beings with their own fears and insecurities. My father, worried about his professional identity and ability to provide. My mother, trying to maintain normalcy while watching their savings dwindle. Both of them, loving me so much they'd hidden their struggles to protect me from additional pain. And in that moment of clarity, I made a decision. Thanksgiving would happen, not as an elaborate production in my parents' dining room, but as something new, something that reflected our current reality while honoring what mattered most about our family tradition. I want to host Thanksgiving this year, I announced. At my apartment. My parents exchanged surprised glances. Honey, that's sweet, but your place is tiny, Mom said gently. And we know money is tight for you too after the divorce, Dad added. It's not about the size of the table or how fancy the meal is, I insisted. It's about being together, especially when things are hard. Isn't that what you've always taught us? But, Mom began. No buts, I interrupted firmly. Jason and I will handle everything. All you need to do is show up. Audrey, we can't let you, Dad started. You're not letting me do anything, I said. I'm telling you what's going to happen. For once, you're going to let your children take care of you. Consider it our thank you for a lifetime of Thanksgivings. The resistance in their expressions began to soften, replaced by something that looked like a mixture of gratitude and pride. Okay, Mom finally said, her voice thick with emotion. Okay. The week that followed was a whirlwind of activity. As soon as Jason arrived that weekend, we launched into planning mode. My one-bedroom apartment would be challenging as a venue. The living room could barely fit my small sofa and coffee table, but we were determined to make it work. We could borrow a folding table from my office, Jason suggested as we sat in our parents' kitchen, making lists. And some extra chairs. And we can use Mom's tablecloth and dishes, I added. No need to buy anything new. Mom hovered nearby, clearly fighting the urge to take over the planning. Don't forget you'll need serving utensils and Mom, Jason and I said in unison, giving her a look. She held up her hands in surrender. Sorry. I'm stepping back. We divided responsibilities based on our strengths. Jason, always good with numbers, took charge of the budget. We agreed to split the grocery costs, keeping things simpler than our usual elaborate spread, but maintaining the essential traditional dishes. We don't need 3 different kinds of potatoes, Jason pointed out reasonably. And maybe 1 pie instead of 4? Blasphemy, I teased, but agreed. We settled on a menu that honored tradition while acknowledging our financial constraints, a medium-sized turkey, not the usual 20-pounder. Stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, my cranberry relish, rolls, and 1 pumpkin pie. While Jason handled the food planning, I focused on the logistics of fitting 4 adults into my apartment comfortably. This involved some creative furniture rearranging, borrowing 2 folding chairs from my neighbor Mrs. Chin, and accepting that my cat Jasper would need to be temporarily confined to the bedroom during dinner. Meanwhile, we took turns helping our parents with more pressing matters. Jason spent Sunday afternoon reviewing their financial situation in detail, bringing his architect's precision to creating a new budget that would stretch their savings further. You've been dipping into your retirement accounts, he noted with concern, looking over the statements. That's not sustainable, Dad. I know, our father admitted. But we had expenses we couldn't avoid. Like helping me with my apartment deposit, I realized aloud, feeling a flush of guilt. Dad, you shouldn't have done that. You needed it, he said simply. Jason and I exchanged looks, the same thought passing between us. Our parents had been sacrificing their own financial security to maintain the illusion that they could still provide for us, as they always had. While Jason worked on the immediate budget concerns, I focused on helping Dad with his job search. As a graphic designer, I had experience creating eye-catching resumes and portfolios. Your resume is solid on content, but visually outdated, I told him honestly. Let me help you modernize it. Dad seemed skeptical at first. Audrey, financial advising isn't about flashy presentations. Every industry has evolved to value good design, I countered. Trust me on this. He relented, and we spent hours updating his resume and LinkedIn profile. I showed him how to use newer features of the platform, set up job alerts, and even recorded him practicing answers to common interview questions. By Tuesday, he had scheduled 2 new interviews for positions he hadn't previously considered, slightly different from his former role, but well-suited to his experience. I never would have applied for these without your encouragement, he admitted. Sometimes we need a fresh perspective, I replied, patting his hand. Meanwhile, Jason discovered that Mom had been quietly developing a small side business selling handmade jewelry on an online crafting platform, something she'd started as a hobby years ago, but had been pursuing more seriously since Dad's job loss. Mom, these sales figures are actually impressive, Jason said, reviewing her account. But you're underpricing everything and your photos don't showcase the pieces well. Mom looked embarrassed. It's just a little extra money. Nothing serious. It could be more, I joined in, excited by this revelation. Mom, your jewelry is beautiful. With better photos and pricing, you could significantly increase your sales. That afternoon turned into an impromptu product photography session, with me styling and shooting her jewelry collection using techniques I'd learned from commercial clients. Jason helped her restructure her pricing strategy, and by evening, her online shop had a professional makeover. I never thought my little hobby could actually help with our situation, Mom said, looking at the updated shop with wonder. You've always been creative, I reminded her. Remember how you used to make all our Halloween costumes from scratch? As Thanksgiving approached, we continued our dual missions, preparing for the holiday while helping our parents with their underlying financial challenges. The process wasn't always smooth. Dad bristled at some of Jason's budget suggestions, his pride still raw. Mom occasionally slipped into her hostess mode, trying to take over the Thanksgiving planning. Mom, the whole point is for you not to do all the work this year, I reminded her after catching her making lists of things to bring to my apartment. I know, she sighed. It's just hard to let go after 35 years of being in charge. Think of it as a promotion, Jason suggested with a grin. You've been elevated to honored guest status. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I called a family meeting at my parents' house. The kitchen table, now cleared of financial papers, became the setting for a different kind of planning session. We need to talk about Christmas, I began. Mom and Dad exchanged concerned glances. Let's be honest with each other from the start this time, I continued. No canceled holidays, no mysterious need for space. Let's acknowledge the reality of our situation and figure out a plan that works for everyone. To my surprise, it was Dad who spoke first. You're right. No more pretending. He took a deep breath. The truth is, we can't do our usual Christmas gift exchange this year. Our budget simply won't allow it. Instead of the awkward silence I half expected, Jason jumped in with enthusiasm. Perfect. I've been wanting to suggest we do a secret Santa instead of buying for everyone. One gift each, with a reasonable price limit. And maybe we focus on experiences instead of things, I added. Like going to see the holiday lights display at the botanical gardens together. The tension visibly left my parents' shoulders as we continued brainstorming, creating a new holiday plan that honored our financial realities while preserving the heart of our family traditions. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. The pain of feeling rejected by my parents had transformed into a deeper understanding of their humanity. The shame they had carried about their financial struggles was gradually being replaced by a tentative acceptance of support. And our family dynamic had shifted in subtle, but profound ways, not with me and Jason becoming the parents, but with all 4 of us recognizing that strength and vulnerability could flow in all directions within a loving family. The day before Thanksgiving, I left work early to prepare my apartment. Jason arrived from Philadelphia in the afternoon, bringing the borrowed table and chairs, plus a surprise, a small television stand he'd built himself to replace my wobbly makeshift one. Early Christmas present, he said with a shrug when I protested that we'd agreed to no gifts yet. Consider it apartment infrastructure. Together we transformed my small space, pushing my couch against the wall to make room for the dining table, setting out Mom's heirloom tablecloth and the good dishes we'd borrowed. We didn't have space for elaborate decorations, but I had picked up some small pumpkins and gourds from the farmer's market, arranging them with votive candles down the center of the table. It's not Mom's usual Martha Stewart spread, Jason observed, looking around. But it has heart. That's what matters, I agreed, feeling a surprising sense of pride in our modest, but meaningful preparations. Later that evening, as Jason and I prepared what we could in advance in my tiny kitchen, he suddenly stopped chopping celery and looked at me. You know, I've been thinking about Dad's job situation, he said. The firm I work with is opening a satellite office in this area next year. They'll need someone with financial expertise for the real estate development side. It's not exactly what Dad did before, but his skills would transfer. Jason, that would be perfect, I exclaimed. Have you mentioned it to him? Not yet. I wanted to make sure the position was really happening first. But I got confirmation yesterday, so I'm going to talk to him about it tomorrow. I hugged my brother impulsively. When did we become the adults in this family? He laughed. I'm not sure we are. But maybe we're finally acting like the team we're supposed to be. As we continued cooking, I realized something had shifted in me as well. For months after my divorce, I had been focused almost exclusively on my own pain and recovery. My parents' crisis had forced me to look beyond myself, to give support rather than just receive it. And somehow, in the process of helping them, I had found a strength I didn't know I possessed. Thanksgiving morning dawned clear and cold. I woke early, nervous energy propelling me out of bed before my alarm. Jasper protested when I disturbed his comfortable position, but I appeased him with breakfast before starting my own preparations. The turkey, much smaller than our usual bird, but still the centerpiece of our meal, needed to go in the oven by 9. I had watched my father prepare the turkey every year of my life, but had never actually done it myself. Thankfully, he had talked me through the process earlier in the week, and I had his handwritten instructions propped against my kitchen backsplash. You can do this, I muttered to myself as I rinsed the bird and patted it dry. It's just a big chicken, right? Jason arrived at 8:30 with coffee and bagels. Thought we could use the fuel, he said, setting them on the counter. How's it going? I'm about to violate this turkey's personal space with herbs and butter, I replied, making him laugh. Working together in my tiny kitchen required a choreographed dance of movements. We bumped elbows, reached over each other for utensils, and occasionally had to step into the hallway to allow the other person to open the oven door. But there was something comforting about the closeness, about working side by side with my brother in a way we hadn't done since we were kids helping Mom with Christmas cookies. Remember when we used to fight over who got to lick the beaters? Jason asked, as if reading my thoughts. And Mom would always magically have 2 beaters ready, one for each of us, I recalled with a smile. By 11, delicious smells filled my apartment. The turkey was roasting, the stuffing was prepared and waiting for its turn in the oven, and the potatoes were peeled and soaking in cold water. Everything was on schedule, a minor miracle given our limited space and experience. Should we check on Mom and Dad? I asked, glancing at the clock. They were due to arrive at 1 o'clock. I already texted Dad. They're on their way, Jason replied. Mom insisted on bringing her special gravy boat and some extra napkins. I smiled, imagining our mother unable to arrive empty-handed. Some things would never change, financial crisis or not. When the doorbell rang at 12:30, I felt a flutter of nervousness. This was the first time I had ever hosted my parents for a major holiday. I wanted everything to be perfect, not to impress them with my hosting skills, but to show them that we could adapt our traditions without losing what made them special. I opened the door to find my parents standing there, both dressed in their Thanksgiving best. Mom held her gravy boat wrapped carefully in a dish towel, while Dad carried a small bouquet of fall flowers. These are for you, he said, handing me the bouquet. Every hostess deserves flowers. The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, Dad. They entered my apartment, taking in the transformed space with appreciative glances. It looks lovely, Audrey, Mom said, her eyes lingering on the table set with her heirloom dishes. You've done a wonderful job. We both did, I corrected, gesturing to Jason, who was emerging from the kitchen with drinks for everyone. Apple cider, he announced. With or without bourbon for the adults. Definitely with, Dad said with a smile, the first genuine one I'd seen from him in weeks. We settled in the living area, perching on the couch and the 2 side chairs I'd arranged for pre-dinner conversation. The space was tight, but not uncomfortably so, cozy rather than cramped. Something smells amazing, Mom commented, visibly restraining herself from going into the kitchen to check on things. That would be the turkey, which is not dry and definitely not on fire, I said proudly. I followed your recipe exactly, Dad. The student becomes the master, he replied with a wink. As we chatted, I noticed a subtle shift in my parents' demeanor. The strained, worried expressions they had worn during my surprise visit had softened. They looked more like themselves, not completely carefree, but present and engaged rather than burdened by secrets. When it came time to serve the meal, we faced our first logistical challenge. My kitchen was too small for our usual buffet-style serving, and the table too crowded for all the dishes. Side table service? Jason suggested, dragging my small end table over to position it next to our dining setup. Perfect, Mom approved. We'll put the vegetables there and keep the turkey and stuffing on the main table. Working together, we managed to get everything to the table hot and more or less simultaneously, no small feat in my limited space. When we finally sat down, the four of us crowded around the borrowed table in my small living room. I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. This wasn't the Thanksgiving I had imagined a month ago. The setting was different, the meal simpler, and all of us somewhat changed by recent events. Yet looking at the faces of my family gathered around my table, I realized we had preserved what mattered most, our connection to each other. Dad cleared his throat. "I think this calls for a toast," he said, raising his glass. "To Audrey and Jason for reminding us what family really means." "And to new traditions," Mom added, her eyes suspiciously bright. "And to honesty," I said, meeting each of their gazes. "Even when it's hard." "Especially then," Jason agreed. We clinked glasses, the simple sound sealing our unspoken promise to face whatever came next together. The meal itself was a success, if not perfect by our usual standards. The turkey was slightly overcooked on one side, my oven apparently had hot spots I hadn't known about. And Jason had forgotten to add butter to the mashed potatoes. But my cranberry relish was declared exactly right by Mom, and Dad went back for seconds of the stuffing. As we ate, our conversation flowed more naturally than it had in months. No one was walking on eggshells or hiding difficult truths. We talked about Dad's upcoming job interviews, about Mom's growing online jewelry business, about Jason's new project at work, and even a little about my gradually healing heart post-divorce. "I have some news, actually," Dad said as we were finishing the main course. "I had a phone interview yesterday for a position I hadn't mentioned to you all yet. It's with a financial literacy nonprofit, helping people learn to manage their money better." "Dad, that sounds perfect for you," I said encouragingly. "It would be a significant pay cut from my previous position," he admitted. "But the work would be meaningful. I'd be helping people avoid the kind of financial problems that can tear families apart." "I think you'd be wonderful at that," Mom said, reaching for his hand. "You've always been a natural teacher." "They want me to come in for an in-person interview next week," he added, a hint of excitement in his voice that had been missing for months. "That's fantastic," Jason said. "And speaking of job opportunities," he went on to tell Dad about the potential position at his firm's new satellite office. As they discussed the details, I caught Mom's eye across the table. She smiled at me, a smile full of gratitude and relief. I smiled back, feeling a deep sense of rightness despite all the recent turmoil. Our quiet moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. "Are you expecting someone?" Mom asked. "No," I said, getting up with a puzzled expression. When I opened the door, I found my friends Stephanie and Tyler standing there, holding a large pie and a container of whipped cream. "Surprise," Stephanie said. "We just finished early at my parents' and thought we'd bring dessert reinforcements. Is that okay?" I laughed, genuinely delighted by their thoughtfulness. "It's more than okay. Come in." I made quick introductions as Jason fetched 2 more folding chairs from the hallway closet, squeezing them in around the already crowded table. With 6 of us now, the space was definitively at capacity, but somehow that made it all the more festive. "We were just about to have pie," I explained as they settled in. "But more pie is always welcome." "2 pies?" Mom exclaimed with mock horror. "Such extravagance." We all laughed, the joke landing perfectly because we understood the context behind it. There was no need to explain our family's financial situation to my friends. What mattered was that we could now acknowledge it openly among ourselves, even find humor in it. As we enjoyed both pumpkin pies, mine slightly overcooked, Stephanie's picture perfect, the conversation flowed easily between family and friends. Tyler shared funny stories from his job as a middle school teacher. Stephanie talked about her recent promotion, Jason pulled up photos on his phone of the house he and his girlfriend were thinking of buying. Looking around my small living room, now filled with people and laughter, I was struck by the contrast between this Thanksgiving and what I had initially imagined. I had wanted the comfort of tradition, the security of the familiar. Instead, I had received something more valuable, a deeper, more honest connection with my family, and a reminder that true security comes not from maintaining appearances, but from facing challenges together. As the evening progressed, we moved from the table back to the living area, now rearranged to accommodate everyone. Mom helped me serve coffee while Dad and Jason cleared the dinner dishes. The effortless way we all pitched in highlighted another shift, from rigid roles to fluid teamwork. "This has been wonderful," Mom said quietly as we stood in the kitchen. "Different, but wonderful." "It has," I agreed. "Thank you for letting us do this for you." She touched my cheek gently. "Thank you for not giving up on us when we tried to push you away." Later, as my parents prepared to leave, Dad pulled me into a tight hug. "I am so proud of you," he whispered. "Not just for today, but for how you've handled everything this year. You're stronger than you know, Audrey." Coming from my father, a man of typically restrained emotions, these words held special weight. I hugged him back, wordlessly communicating my own pride in him for facing his challenges with renewed courage. After everyone had left and Jason had retired to the air mattress in my living room, I sat quietly on my bedroom floor, Jasper purring in my lap. The apartment was a disaster of dirty dishes and moved furniture, but cleanup could wait until morning. In the stillness, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this day. What had begun as a painful rejection, "Skip Thanksgiving, we need space," had transformed into an opportunity for deeper connection and growth. My parents' misguided attempt to protect me had ultimately led to a more honest relationship between us all. And somewhere along the way, in the midst of supporting them through their crisis, I had found healing for my own wounded heart. The pain of my divorce was still there, but it had receded from an all-consuming presence to a dull ache, one thread in the complex tapestry of my life, rather than the dominant pattern. As I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked different somehow, more settled in my own skin, more at peace with life's uncertainties. I was still Audrey, still 28, still healing from heartbreak, but I was also stronger, wiser, and more deeply connected to my family than ever before. Some mistakes, it seemed, could lead to unexpected blessings if we were brave enough to face them honestly together. The days following Thanksgiving brought a flurry of positive developments. Dad's interview with the financial literacy nonprofit went exceptionally well, and they offered him a position the following week. As he had anticipated, the salary was substantially lower than his previous corporate role, but the work aligned perfectly with his values and experience. "I'll be designing educational programs for high school students and young adults," he explained when he called to share the news. "Teaching them about budgeting, saving, responsible credit use, all the things I wish someone had taught me when I was starting out." The energy in his voice made it clear this wasn't just a consolation prize after months of rejection. He was genuinely excited about this new chapter, seeing purpose in the unexpected career shift that had initially felt like failure. Meanwhile, Jason and I continued our efforts to support our parents through their transition. I spent a Saturday helping Dad update his professional wardrobe for his new role, finding quality pieces at thrift stores and consignment shops that wouldn't strain their budget. "I never knew shopping could be strategic," Dad commented as we successfully found a designer blazer for a fraction of its original price. "Welcome to how most of us millennials live," I replied with a laugh. "Luxury on a budget." Jason focused on helping them refinance their mortgage to lower their monthly payments, using his connections in real estate to find them the best possible rate. He also set up a spreadsheet to track Mom's growing jewelry business, which had seen a significant uptick in orders after our marketing makeover. "I sold 15 pieces last week," Mom reported proudly during our Sunday family call. "That's more than I used to sell in a month." "The holiday shopping season is just beginning," I reminded her. "We should think about some seasonal pieces and special promotions." What struck me most during these weeks was how naturally we had fallen into a new family dynamic, one where support flowed in all directions rather than just from parents to children. We weren't taking over or infantilizing our parents. We were simply putting our own skills and resources into the family pool, just as they had always done for us. December arrived, bringing with it the next test of our new approach to family traditions, Christmas. True to our Thanksgiving discussion, we implemented a secret Santa exchange instead of our usual extravaganza of presents. The spending limit, $50 per person, felt both reasonable and challenging, pushing us to be thoughtful rather than extravagant. I drew Mom's name and spent weeks planning the perfect gift. Rather than buying something new, I gathered photos from throughout her life. As a child, on her wedding day, holding me and Jason as babies, recent shots from family gatherings, and created a handmade photo album that told the story of her life. The only out-of-pocket expense was the album itself and printing costs, but the time invested made it far more valuable than any store-bought gift. When Christmas Day arrived, we gathered at my parents' home, the traditional location, but with simplified decorations and a potluck meal instead of Mom's usual elaborate spread. The gift exchange revealed how well we had embraced our new reality. Jason had built Dad a custom stand for his fishing rods. Dad had found Mom a first-edition copy of her favorite childhood book at a used bookstore. Mom had knitted me a beautiful scarf in exactly the colors I loved. "This is the best Christmas we've had in years," Mom declared as we sat together that evening. "Less stuff, more meaning." Dad nodded agreement. I don't think I realized how much pressure I put on myself to make the holidays perfect until we couldn't do it that way anymore. "Sometimes limitations bring clarity," Jason observed. "When you can't do everything, you figure out what really matters." As winter turned to spring, our family continued to adjust to our new normal. Dad thrived in his nonprofit role, finding satisfaction in work that directly helped others. Mom's jewelry business steadily grew, providing a meaningful supplement to their income. They still faced financial challenges and had to make careful budgeting decisions, but the crushing stress and shame that had led them to cancel Thanksgiving had lifted. For my part, I experienced my own evolution. The divorce that had once defined my daily existence gradually became just one chapter in my story rather than the whole book. I started dating again, cautiously, mindfully, and found myself better able to articulate what I wanted in a relationship after experiencing both the failure of my marriage and the renewal of my family bonds. One evening in April, I visited my parents for dinner. As we sat on their back patio, enjoying the first truly warm evening of spring, Dad brought up the previous Thanksgiving. "I've been thinking about how differently that could have gone," he said reflectively. "If you hadn't shown up at our door that day, Audrey." "But I did," I said simply. "Yes, you did." He smiled. "You know, I spent most of my adult life thinking my job as a parent was to shield you kids from any hardship, to solve problems before you ever knew they existed. I thought admitting we were struggling would be failing you somehow. Instead, hiding it was what almost came between us," Mom added. "I still can't believe we thought canceling Thanksgiving was the solution." "Well, in a way, it was," I pointed out. "Just not in the way you intended. It forced us to have conversations we needed to have. It made us reevaluate what family really means." "And what does it mean?" Dad asked, his question genuine rather than rhetorical. I thought for a moment before answering. "I think it means being brave enough to show up imperfectly for each other. To offer what we have rather than hiding when we can't provide what we think we should." Mom reached over to squeeze my hand. "When did you get so wise?" "Must be those Harrison genes," I joked. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey our family had taken over the past 6 months. What had begun as a painful misunderstanding, "Skip Thanksgiving, we need space," had ultimately strengthened our bonds in ways none of us could have anticipated. My parents had learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but the foundation of genuine connection. Jason and I had discovered capacities for support and leadership that might have remained dormant in a more traditional family hierarchy. And I had found that helping others through their struggles had been an unexpected pathway to healing my own wounds. Sometimes the detours in life, the canceled plans, the unexpected crises, the moments when nothing goes as expected lead us to destinations far more meaningful than our original itinerary. My parents' mistake in pushing us away had paradoxically brought us closer than ever before. As for me, I entered the summer with a stronger sense of self and family than I'd had before my divorce. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, such wounds never do, but it had transformed into something valuable: wisdom, resilience, and a deeper capacity for both giving and receiving love. And isn't that what family is truly meant to teach us? I still have the photo I took that Thanksgiving in my tiny apartment, all of us crowded around my borrowed table, the turkey slightly lopsided, our smiles genuine. It sits on my desk as a daily reminder that perfection is highly overrated, that honest imperfection builds stronger bonds than flawless pretense ever could. So if you're facing a family holiday that feels broken or imperfect, if traditions are changing due to circumstances beyond your control, remember our story. Sometimes what appears to be falling apart is actually falling into place in a new and better configuration. The holiday that matters isn't the one in the magazines or social media posts. It's the one where real people show up with their real struggles and joys, making room for both around whatever table they can manage to set. Have you ever had a holiday that didn't go as planned but ended up being meaningful in unexpected ways? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need this reminder that perfection isn't a prerequisite for connection. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful traditions are born from the ashes of ones we thought we couldn't live without.